right, I think we are live here. We'll give everybody a few minutes to join us and get settled before we get started. But today we will be focusing on our talk, Technical Tips to Survive 2021. If you joined us over the summer, we had a presentation, or I'm sorry, a conference of our own where we covered some different areas, trying to focus on things to help everybody get through this unique situation that we've been all been in here for the last year. So yeah, we'll get into that in a few minutes here. Like I said, everybody can awkwardly watch us drink tea. So everybody gets their drink in.
You made it sound so good. I just had to.
I've always been a trendsetter, so
Adam's
just continuing that theme. All right. Well, again, thank you everybody for joining us. Thanks to Craft Beer Professionals and Andrew for having us again. We're always happy to participate, be a part of such a great organization. So I am Adam Kabbalah. I am the treasurer for District Pittsburgh MBAA. Joining me today are Dr. Gregg Johnson. Gregg is the chair of the Natural Sciences, Engineering, and Technology Department at Point Park University. Along with Gregg, joining us as well is Dr. Brendan Mullan, an assistant professor of physics at Point Park University as well, and Dr. Connor Murphy, an assistant professor of chemistry and biology at Point Park, as well as a science lab associate. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
Thank you.
We'll do the muted in the head nod like everybody's getting used to. So among other things today, we're mostly going to be focusing on the concept of cleaning Brite Tanks under pressure. As I mentioned previously, the last year has presented some unique challenges. One of which has been a lot of breweries are holding on to beer longer than expected, and not only longer than expected, but unpredictably. So, questions rising as far as how long beer is going to be around, when it will be able to get moved. So, as many of the viewers I'm sure are familiar with today, oxygen is a large enemy of beer, so reducing that in any way possible should be a huge focus of any brew protocols. So we're going to start our presentation today with an instructional video that District Pittsburgh has put together in conjunction with Point Park and Burco Chemicals as well, to kind of give everybody a brief overview of our procedure here at Mindful Brewing Company for cleaning under pressure, as well as the procedure used at a member brewery, Dancing Gnome Brewery, featuring Katie Sullivan, their head brewer there as well. So if we can go ahead and cue up the video, we'll take a look at that.
Greetings, my name is Chris Carr and I'm the president of the Master Brewers Association, Pittsburgh District. Today, we will be discussing CIP under pressure in a Brite beer tank and its benefits. Some of these benefits include saving you time, saving you money, and lowering your DO. This is the process.
I'm Katie Sullivan. I'm a brewer here at Dancing Gnome in Pittsburgh. I've been here for a little bit over a year and a half, and I'm going to talk about how we clean under pressure our Brite tanks. We keep our tanks cold throughout the duration of this process. We set up our cart pump, connect it to an open yeast brink. We use the yeast brink first to rinse the tank out, so rinse any beer that might be in there out, and drain it kind of through another part of our pump loop. And then we also use the yeast brink to mix our chemicals, and we'll add our chemical solution to the water mix at the dilution that we want. And we'll pump that in through the spray ball into our Brite tank, leaving it under pressure but with the jackets off. Then kind of run our acid cycle cold, rinse it again with cold water after the cycle, and then go into our sanding cycle. There's a lot of benefits to cleaning under pressure that way. It saves us a lot of time. We never get our tank hot. So while we are turning our jackets off, while we're running these cycles, we are still saving a significant amount on glycol compared to when we used to do hot acid cycles. We are saving on CO2. We don't have to fully purge our tanks in the same way that we do after an open caustic cycle, which we do every about 6 weeks. But our purge times are much shorter, so we're using a lot less gas. And it's a lot quicker overall, just a lot more efficient, cheaper, and we've been really happy with the results of, cost savings and efficiency, and the beer is in perfect condition, so we are pretty happy with this process.
Hey everyone, we hope you enjoyed this video on CIP under pressure. We hope that you gained some insight through our officers, Adam and Katie. And through the Master Brewers Association, you can continue to hone your skills and gain knowledge and never stop learning about beer.
There we go. All right. So hopefully that gave everybody a little bit of an insight into a couple of the ways that you can clean under pressure. So next we'll talk a little bit about some of the concepts that we saw in that picture, specifically comparing hot and cold rinses. Comparing the benefits of this to not cleaning under pressure. So one thing that Katie mentioned in her second half of the video is that they clean. They do not do a hot rinse, where we do a hot rinse here at Mindful Brewing Company. That's really for a couple of reasons. One is we are not as concerned with conserving glycol in this case. Of course, with any of these procedures, it's very dependent on the equipment that you have and the situation that you're in. So we're fortunate enough that we don't have too much concern about heating our tanks up. One benefit that we do see with the hot rinse is that this does serve as sort of a pre-sanitation step. I think the video mentions that we do bring the tank up to above 160 degrees, which is close to the range of what is considered pasteurization temperature. So we're really kind of starting that sanitation process just with that hot rinse. More specifically, the chemicals that we use that are featured, the Alternator and the Expuma from Burco, require those to be hot rinses. So that, sort of dictated by the chemical. The hot rinse also serves for us as well to sanitize both the rinsing hoses that we're using for the Brite tank, as well as the pump and everything that's used, again, running it at that hot temperature. Hot water also at that temperature is going to have less dissolved oxygen, which of course is which of course is the whole point of what we're talking about today. So with that, I'm going to bring some of our Point Park folks in here, and if we can have the slides put up, Andrew, that would be great. I think he's a little busy here. So Greg, if you want to start to give us, while we wait for the slides to come up here.
Sure.
If you want to kind of give us a history of where the Point Park program came from, and how it fits into our theme for today of technical tips to start 2021.
Yeah, I think it fits in well because my colleague Brendan and I here, going back maybe 2 years, have been thinking about how to start some sort of brewing science program or some beer-centered program at our school. And, it's taken us a while to figure out the sweet spot for that. And because it doesn't really fit the small liberal arts school, our undergrad population, not necessarily really your potential brewers out there, by and large anyway. So we sort of kicked around half-baked ideas for quite a while, and then we finally approached Adam and Marcus Cox over at Mindful Brewing. Said, I think what we need to do is make this useful for the industry and not just sort of a fun project for us to do. So we're really kind of setting up as a service to the local industry. And so pretty much our meetings with Marcus and Adam were, how can we tailor this program so that it meets your guys' needs, right? So among other things, we said we want to make it useful to the local brewing industry, right? We want to combine science faculty with brewing professionals doing the actual course delivery. But we want to open up the course to the community so it's not, our audience isn't just limited to existing Point Park students. Those aren't necessarily the people going into brewing, as I mentioned. So we also want to make it affordable and accessible along those lines. So we're offering this course after hours, typical like 6 to 9 class periods, so people can continue to work full time. We might want to make it very hands-on, so we'll be doing this in chemistry lab. We'll actually have a pilot brewery in the lab so we can actually brew some beer. And we also want to offer a couple of scholarships to encourage diversity. So we settled on splitting the course into 2 halves. The first half is really going to be science-centered, and that's just kind of to really set the stage for the participants to be able to engage better with the brewing professionals who are going to be running the second half of the course. So we wanted, in 4 weeks, we want to give them as solid a foundation in the relevant science as we can. So we'll be covering, all the chemistry that's going on. We'll take a deep dive into the ingredients and with relation to the chemistry and the microbiology going on, as well as a section on brewery physics. Next one. So we have a nice new chem lab at our university, so we're going to be working in there. The second part, we'll be going out into the field for several trips to local breweries, and we will still have a few lectures in-house, but those will be given by brewing professionals. And there's a picture of me and Adam over at Mindful.
Looking as busy as possible, of course.
Yes. We were. So, just as a note, as you see there, one of the topics is CIP, and that's going to be part of our visit to Dancing Gnome. So we'll see the CIP under pressure. Mm-hmm. In the first half, then we'll be set up with the section on sterilization and sanitization of your vessels, right? So next slide there. So really, by involving the MBAA so much, our hope here is that, or not our hope, but our goal is that the brewing community is going to be taught by brewers, and the scientists will stick to the science in the first half. So, for example, which I already mentioned, the CIP under pressure, we'll cover the chemistry of the cleaning in the first half, and then we'll go out into the field and see it being done. Basically, we want the students to be well equipped to really ask good questions by the time we get into that second half. This is just some of the our participating breweries and other professionals.
All right, so thank you, Greg. So one thing that Greg did mention there, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, there we go. So one thing that Greg did mention is really kind of that marriage of, theory in the first half and practice in the second half. And, I think that's really, to me, one of the focuses of the program is kind of bridging that gap, and I think, and I include myself in this in some cases, I think people know what they're doing. They might not know why they're doing it or why they aren't doing it. So I really think that this program, we're really kind of aim to bridge that gap. So with that, I do want to talk a little bit again, coming back to the CIP under pressure. So we mentioned, it's mentioned briefly in the video, but we'll take a little bit of a more deeper dive into it. The chemicals we use are acid-based, and that is for a couple reasons. The kind of materials, largely the kind of materials that you're trying to remove in Brite tanks are going to react better to acid-type cleaners. So Brite tanks tend to see more beer stone, inorganics, things like that. The acid is really going to do better with. But a lot of it also is based on safety issue. And I'm going to let Connor speak a little bit about the dangers and the reason for CO2 and caustic not being friends.
Yeah, so we're talking about cleaning through the fermenter, which should have a heavy amount of CO2 inside of it. And so the idea of flowing an acid being safer. So caustic in general refers to something that just kind of degrades other things, but it usually means a base. So something that with a hydroxide group, OH. And as we know, acids and bases will interact. But what may or may not be apparent is that carbon dioxide itself dissolves into water and actually acidifies water through an interaction, which creates something called carbonic acid. And so if you have carbonic acid and then you flow a bunch of a base through, the acids and the bases will interact and they will form, in the case of sodium hydroxide, sodium carbonate or sodium bicarbonate. Which stays in solution or can even start to settle out as a solid. And so that makes more room, if you will, in the solution for more carbon dioxide to flow into the water. So you're removing more carbon dioxide out of the solution and you're neutralizing more and more caustic. And so this has two fundamental effects. So one is that as you neutralize more and more of your caustic cleaning solution, there's less available to actually do the cleaning that you want it to do. But more importantly, as you remove more and more carbon dioxide out of the container, there is no gas to replace it with. And so the pressure starts to drop inside of the container. And that actually can start to cause the fermenter the forces from outside start to overwhelm the internal pressure, which causes the fermenter to actually implode under extreme circumstances. And apparently this happens quite a bit. And so, I confirmed with the professionals that it's bad if your fermenter implodes.
Yes.
So flowing a caustic through a CO2 rich environment can actually cause quite a few problems. And so, so it's better to use an acidic cleaner because you avoid a lot of these issues. And we'll talk about the details of some of these reactions more in the class.
Absolutely. And, like I said, that's a great explanation, Connor. Thank you. Yes, it's really kind of getting to that point of, everybody I think kind of has entered into this backwards in some ways. They learned how to make beer first, and now they're learning, the science behind it. So in addition to the cleaning process as well, Connor, I believe you're going to be touching on sanitation in that same environment, as well as we'll speak to sanitation first, and then we'll talk about oxygen.
Sure. So, I mean, again, kind of coming at it from the more science point of view, the brewing point of view, there's a demonstration that I always love to do where we just get some simple auger plates and you can just open them to the environment. You can do this anywhere or you can swab them, and they're just like a little nutrient base that grows bacteria on them. And in a few days, you can see how much bacteria you have in an environment. And it's just a simple little demonstration that shows that there's bacteria, everywhere. It's all around us. The way I always like to teach it is that we're kind of in a blizzard of bacteria at all times, but it's kind of hard to believe because we don't see it, and most of the time it doesn't affect us. But of course, in wort and in the brewing process, that's a very rich environment for bacteria to reproduce. And so it's just a couple of quick demonstrations to show how this is a real thing to think about, and how sanitation and sterilization can kind of play a role in reducing those numbers. It's something that we'll be talking about as well.
So that brings me kind of to my next point. We finish our half of video with a shot of us taking the ATP swab, and I was wondering as well if you could kind of give a high level overview of what ATP is, and of course anybody can feel free to chime in as well. I don't want to keep picking on Connor here, but speak to what ATP is and why that serves as sort of a general marker, not just for specific bacteria, but maybe for, kind of all contaminants.
Sure. So ATP is a kind of a universal energy currency. It's a molecule that pretty much all living things use to power various chemical processes. And so it's a good general indicator of biological activity being present. In particular, the technology of using an ATP swab is really useful because it can be powered by a luminescence assay, wherein the ATP can be used to power basically a chemical that lights up, and so it gives you a nice, easy visual readout of whether or not biological activity is present. And one of the keys being that it's very sensitive, so you don't need a lot of it to really be able to pick up on biological activity.
So you mentioned that it's a light-based assay. So that's the units are RLU, I believe, is the units that the reader that we have gives to them. So it acts as an indicator of activity, but to really tie that to specific like biological activity is tough. With those arbitrary units, it's kind of for us it tends to be more of a pass-fail kind of thing. So the other thing we wanted to touch on today is not only the chemistry of what is going on with this kind of cleaning, but the physics as well. So it's particularly with cleaning under pressure. It's a process that not a lot of folks are familiar with, so I think it can kind of be intimidating when dealing with that aspect of it. So Brendan, if you can speak to a little bit to why this is possible, and just sort of maybe a highlight or an overview of some of the areas that you'll be touching on for the course.
Well, sure. I mean, I think where I'll start is the way.
I know that was a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. So explain all the physics, Brendan. Okay.
Yeah. Come on. Yeah.
So the way I think about it, brewing is housed in the language of biology and chemistry. And biology and chemistry as a language is housed in the grammar and the alphabet of physics. So to really help to understand some of these complex biochemical processes that you're talking about, it really helps to understand a little bit about physics. And by that, I mean some of the basic ideas like pressure and temperature, density. Beer is a fluid, right? Fluids have viscosity. So in my section of the course, we'll be talking about some of that basic language that helps us to define that grammar to help to define the basic language of the biochemical things that Connor will be talking about. So we'll also talk about heat transfer, thermodynamics, right? So we'll understand a little bit more about how those heat exchangers work when you use them to cool the wort. And one of my favorite parts of all this is when you have the final product and you want to do quality analysis, the types of instrumentation that you use, spectrophotometry and refractometry, that's all a flavor of light and optics, which if you kind of go at the layer of physics underneath that, that's quantum mechanics. So remarkably, the same branch of physics that earned Albert Einstein his Nobel Prize in the 1920s will earn you a better beer.
So no Nobel yet is what you're saying. I have to wait a little bit for.
Yeah, not for me, but
Yeah.
knowing a little bit more about physics, you'll start to understand those relationships like gas laws, pressure, volume, temperature, how they all relate. And really underneath it all is just one central idea in physics, and that's energy and mass is always conserved. So if you always conserve these fundamental quantities, everything else will make sense.
Which of course comes back to the discussion that Connor and I were having, with that endothermic reaction with the caustic. And like I say, it's really, I think a lot of folks know what they are doing, and maybe even understand why they are doing it to a little bit of degree, but really getting into those the fundamental aspects of it. I think we've between the four of us, we've kind of discussed as well, really this approach of or taking a scientific approach to some of these problems, and not to say that people are guessing, but we're really trying to go down that decision tree. I think.
Yeah, this is all one big realization of the scientific method, however you've learned it. So in different branches of science, you use it to answer all sorts of problems about the nature of the universe itself. But here, the central problem is, how do you brew X beer? How do you make a clone of Y? How do you improve a specific process for Z? So part of our course is kind of developing that mindset, that's kind of meta thinking that allows you to really quantitatively get at those improvements you want to make in your brewery operations over time.
Absolutely. As we kind of demonstrated today, I think that sort of approach leads to more of a discussion, as opposed to let's assume and try and find the one answer, that's going to solve all of our problems. Often there are multiple answers, or more often there isn't really a right answer. So being able to, for you guys, it's about justifying it to a pub, trying to get a paper published, or things like that. Even justifying it to yourself, and saying, okay, well, this is a new idea, but I've gone through the steps, and I think that this applies to my setting, or not. To me, I really kind of see as a focus of the program, but where we're kind of focusing with our instructional videos as well. Unfortunately, a lot of these concepts are difficult to cover in detail, in such a short amount of time as a video, but even in a short amount of time as the course. So really kind of getting everybody set up for that discussion. I think is kind of the focus to me. Greg, if you want to chime in there.
Well, yeah, I was going to comment that these 8 weeks are going to go awfully fast for us and the students, just because we're going to want to cram everything in there. And, there are whole programs built on this, like UC Davis. And, they take a little longer time because there's just so much. And so, we're not trying to do all that in 8 weeks, but we want to give them the best shot we can. I did want to mention, too, there's a lot of focus on troubleshooting, and when things go wrong, that's when you look at the science. But there's also, like Chris Carr, who introduced the video, he's brewing gluten-free beer, so he's taking one of the 4 ingredients and just throwing it out. And it's like, you really got to understand what's going on if you do that, right? Did you just lose all your enzymes and the things that really make it work? So I think one of our lectures will be given by Chris. We'll be talking about non-traditional ingredients and things like that. So I think it underscores the need to know what's going on the chemistry end.
Yeah, and I, not recently, of course, but certainly earlier on in my career, and I think everybody experiences this. Is it's a lot of, imitation and doing things by rote. And that's great, and if that's the level that some people are comfortable with, there's of course anything wrong with that. But like you said, sounds to put it simply, why am I pressing this button? Not just when do I press this button? So I think you're right. So we'll just to bring it back here in the last few minutes before we open it up for questions. Today's focus, of course, it was in the setting of the Point Park course with everybody joining me here. But today's main focus really was on cleaning under pressure. There are certainly, as we saw with the video, there are at least 2 different ways to do it. I would assume that there are more as well. But really focusing on those concepts of keeping the caustic away from the process, focusing on that acid cleaning, focusing on being able to get that chemical into the Brite tank. Brendan touched on that a little bit with just some high level stuff that we'll go into more within the course. Using that external vessel to get your cleaning chemicals into that Brite tank, and then really rinsing afterwards. And of course, when you put it like that, it's only 3 easy steps. And I'm sure everybody's ready to go out and do it themselves. But what we really hope for this video and this lecture, this presentation as well, like I said, is a jumping off point. We want to, and craft beer professionals and Andrew do a great job of this as well. Like I said, of really starting that discussion, and getting everybody talking about what is going on, getting into the details and kind of going from there. So with that, I will officially end the formal presentation part of our presentation here. So as I look now, I do see we have a question regarding the ATP swabs that we use. So a keen viewer noticed that when we take the ATP swabs, unfortunately, we are not able to take them from inside the pressurized vessel. So we do take them from what is essentially an external port. We do not run micro on each batch. That's just not a capability that we have. That's certainly something that larger breweries are able to do. The idea that we kind of focus on with where we take our swabs from is that the valve into the area that we're taking the swab from is included in the entire loop of the cleaning process. So any contamination that's contained inside of the tank, we are making the assumption that it is going to get transferred to that external surface. Definitely one of the limitations of cleaning under pressure like this. When you do have an open vessel, we are able to swab from inside the vessel. But yeah, unfortunately, that's just one of the drawbacks. It's minor drawbacks to this procedure. Does the panel have any thoughts or questions they want to add, or we want to save it all for the course? We don't want to give everybody too much.
Right. Yeah. Let's start charging.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. I guess if everybody kind of wants to go around and give their high level overview of their section of the course, we'll call it there.
Oh, one thing I wanted to mention, Adam, if you didn't already say it, some of the environmental benefits
Sure.
of the procedure, in particular CO2 and.
Yeah. So again, kind of high level view here. That I've certainly skipped some things. Reduction of the use of CO2 is really kind of the other major benefit of this. Not typically when you open the tanks, that's going to purge all of that CO2 that's in that particular vessel. So anytime that you open one of these tanks, you're required to purge it of that oxygen again. While that does reduce the oxygen significantly in the vessel, each time this procedure is completed, the dissolved oxygen is reduced each time without adding as much CO2 as you would have to add as if you opened this tank completely. So hopefully that clears that up for everybody a little bit there. Greg, if you had other thoughts.
Yeah, well, I was going to also ask, what about how does it hit the bottom line? Are you saving money with this procedure?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, so the main cost saving is going to be with the CO2. That's one thing that Katie did mention is they see some additional cost savings by doing the cycle cold. Where we run ours hot and then have to cool afterwards using our glycol jackets. And that does add that cooling process does add additional use of CO2. So that is one area that we could see some reduction. But like I mentioned earlier, you're always weighing cost benefit, with all of these things. So the doing it under pressure saves us enough CO2 that the quote unquote excess use with that cooling, is kind of an acceptable loss, so to speak. I think on the long term, you are going to see cost savings. I don't want to say that that's a minor benefit because it certainly is not. But really, the focus with this is that DO reduction or that dissolved oxygen reduction. And depending on who you ask, that's priceless. And really, in this, I think this speaks to why they do it at Dancing Gnome as well. Hoppy beers, particularly, are particularly susceptible to oxygen degradation. And at a hop forward or hop focused brewery like Dancing Gnome, that's going to be particularly important for their shelf stability is to reduce that oxygen. So cost savings, I think they are there, but product quality is paramount. So,
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are almost out of time. So unless anybody has any thoughts that they would like to add at this time from the group, take that as that's all right. That's fine. So thanks again to everybody on the panel for joining us today. Thank you as always to Craft Beer Professionals for hosting us. Please go and check out anything you might have missed before our presentation. Please check out the rest of their schedule today, as well as the next few days. They have some great stuff coming up, so I would definitely check that out. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you.
Cheers.